The massive space station Nexus Prime drifted silently in the void between star systems. Its crystal halls had witnessed countless diplomatic meetings, but today felt different. The air hummed with tension as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what many believed would be humanity's final negotiation. Director Kim Hannah walked through the corridors with steady steps. Her simple black uniform stood out among the elaborate armor and ceremonial robes of other delegates. She carried no weapons, no guards flanked her sides, and her expression remained calm despite knowing what awaited her in the council chamber. The great hall stretched before her like a coliseum. Thousands of beings filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a tapestry of scales, chitin, and metal. At the center sat the high table, where the galaxy's most powerful civilizations held court. Hannah took her assigned seat at the far end, noting how the other representatives had positioned themselves to emphasize her isolation. Admiral Corvin of the Krex Imperium stood first. His massive frame, enhanced with cybernetic implants, cast a shadow across the table. Fellow beings, his voice boomed through translators, we gather to discuss the human problem. For too long, these soft creatures have occupied valuable systems while contributing nothing to galactic security. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Krex had built their reputation on conquest. Their black ships could crack planets in half with gravitational weapons. Every species in the galaxy either served them or feared them. The collective agrees, spoke Hivemind Zara of the Vorthak. Her pale, elongated form pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as she communicated telepathically with her subordinates. Human colonies sit on mineral-rich worlds that could fuel our expansion. Their inefficient extraction methods waste precious resources. The Vorthak Collective was known for consuming entire star systems. They would arrive with massive ships and strip away everything useful, leaving behind only empty space and debris. Worlds that had taken billions of years to form would be reduced to raw materials in mere days. Queen Nexus of the Zephyrian Hives clicked her mandibles in what passed for laughter among her kind. The humans amuse us with their small ships and careful words. Our swarms have scouted their defenses. A few million drones could overwhelm their pathetic attempts at military protection. The Zephyrians bred warriors like other species grew crops. Their hive ships could birth thousands of soldiers in hours, creating instant armies that moved with perfect coordination. They had devoured civilizations that seemed invincible, leaving nothing behind but empty worlds. Through all of this, Hannah sat quietly. She made notes on a simple tablet, occasionally sipping water from a plain glass. When other delegates looked at her, they saw exactly what they expected, a weak representative of a weak species, trying to survive among giants. The human response. Admiral Corvin's voice carried mockery. Surely the Great Oath has something to say about these reasonable requests. Hannah stood slowly. The hall fell silent, but not from respect. Every being present waited to see how she would beg, how she would offer concessions, how she would desperately try to buy more time for her doomed species. The human response, she began, her voice clear but not loud, is that we appreciate the Galactic Council's time and consideration. We understand the concerns raised by our esteemed colleagues. More murmurs spread through the crowd. This was the expected weakness. The Krex, Vorthak, and Zephyrians exchanged glances that said everything, humanity would fold as easily as they had predicted. Earth respectfully requests that the Council consider alternative solutions that might benefit all parties, Hannah continued. We believe cooperation serves us better than conflict. We have always preferred diplomacy to other methods of resolving disputes. Admiral Corvin laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through his mechanical throat enhancements. Diplomacy? You speak of diplomacy while offering nothing? The Krex Imperium demands immediate surrender of the colonies in the Outer Rim. Consider it tribute for our protection. The collective requires access to the mineral wealth of 15 human worlds, added Hivemind Zara. Your primitive extraction methods are wasteful. We will process these resources efficiently. The hives claim breeding rights to 7 agricultural worlds, clicked Queen Nexus. Your food production techniques lack proper optimization. We will improve them significantly. The demands kept coming. Each civilization wanted something from humanity, and none offered anything in return except the promise not to destroy Earth immediately. The message was clear: submit completely or face annihilation. Hannah listened to each demand without interruption. She took careful notes, asked for clarification on technical points, and maintained the same polite tone throughout. To the assembled delegates, she appeared to be a bureaucrat desperately trying to find ways to satisfy impossible demands. But something had changed in her expression. The careful politeness remained, but underneath it lay something else. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried a different quality. "We have always chosen courtesy over alternatives," she said quietly, her words somehow carrying to every corner of the vast hall despite their soft delivery. "We have filed diplomatic protests instead of taking direct action. We have negotiated instead of simply solving problems through force. We have been patient when others might have chosen different approaches." She paused, looking around the table at each of the great powers in turn. "Perhaps that was our mistake." The words hung in the air like a challenge no one quite understood. The delegates shifted uneasily, sensing something had changed but unable to identify what. Hannah's polite smile remained exactly the same, but somehow it no longer looked weak. It looked dangerous. 3 weeks after the council meeting, the tests began. Admiral Corvin's war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri trade corridor, their massive ships forming a steel wall across the shipping lanes. The black hulls of Krek's dreadnoughts stretched for kilometers, bristling with weapons that could vaporize asteroids. "No human vessel passes without tribute," Corvin announced across all frequencies. 100 tons of refined metals per ship. Consider it a lesson in respect. The human merchant captains found themselves trapped. Behind them lay empty space. Ahead waited the most feared military force in the galaxy. Captain Lee Minho of the cargo hauler New Sol stared at his communications panel as the demand repeated. "Sir," his navigator whispered, "what do we do?" Minho keyed his transmitter with shaking hands. "This is Captain Lee requesting permission to contact Earth Command for instructions." Corvin's laughter boomed across the channel. "Contact whoever you wish, little human. Your leaders will tell you the same thing they always do: submit and survive." Similar scenes played out across human space. In the Kepler system, massive Vorthak mining platforms descended toward the agricultural world of New Busan like metallic mountains. Their industrial extractors began tearing into the planet's outer atmosphere, testing how close they could come before the humans reacted. Colony Governor Park Sora watched from her office as the alien machines blocked out the sun. Her communication array buzzed with panicked calls from farmers whose crops were dying under the artificial shadow. "Governor," her aide stammered, "the Vorthak are poisoning our air with their exhaust. If they continue, the harvest will fail completely." Sora gritted her teeth as she composed another diplomatic message to Earth. "Urgent assistance requested. Vorthak mining operations threatening colony survival. Please advise immediate response." Meanwhile, in the outer territories, Zephyrian scout swarms moved like clouds of glittering insects around human defense stations. They didn't attack directly, but their presence made normal operations impossible. The creatures would dart close to human ships, probe their hulls with scanning beams, then retreat just beyond weapon range. Commander Kim Dae-ho of Defense Platform 7 watched the alien swarm through his viewports. Thousands of them moved in perfect synchronization, each no larger than a fighter but collectively forming a threat that could overwhelm his station in minutes. "They're testing our response times," his tactical officer reported. "Every time we power up weapons, they measure how long it takes. They're learning our defensive patterns." "And we just let them?" Dae-ho asked through gritted teeth. "Orders from Earth Command, sir. Avoid engagement unless directly attacked." The humiliation spread across human space like wildfire. News networks throughout the galaxy picked up the story with unconcealed glee. Holographic reporters stood before images of blocked trade routes and threatened colonies while delivering their commentary. "Once again, humanity demonstrates why they remain second-class citizens in galactic affairs," sneered a Krex commentator. "Their merchant fleets cower behind diplomatic messages while real civilizations take action." A Vorthak analyst appeared on another channel, her pale features twisted in what might have been amusement. "Human agricultural techniques are so primitive that our mining exhaust actually improves their soil composition. Perhaps we are doing them a favor." Even minor species joined the mockery. Trading posts that had once welcomed human visitors now openly laughed at their customers. "Will you be paying in credits or apologies?" became a common joke among station merchants. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Human colonies sent increasingly desperate messages to Earth. Trade revenues collapsed as shipping companies refused to risk the blockades. Food shortages began on worlds cut off from supply lines. On the surface, Earth's response remained frustratingly consistent. The Ministry of Interstellar Affairs filed formal complaints through proper diplomatic channels. Ambassador Hannah issued carefully worded statements calling for peaceful resolution through dialogue. Press conferences featured officials expressing deep concern and serious disappointment with their galactic neighbors. But deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in facilities that most humans didn't know existed, something very different was happening. Admiral Park Jin-woo stood before a wall of monitors in a command center that officially didn't exist. The screens showed star maps, ship positions, and data streams that would have terrified the galaxy's military leaders if they had known what they were seeing. "Sir," a technician reported, "all deep space monitoring stations are reporting ready status." Jin-woo nodded as he reviewed files that carried warnings in 17 different languages. The covers bore symbols that predated humanity's first contact with alien civilizations, symbols that meant classified beyond top secret and planetary defense authorization required. "What's the status of the Pacifica array?" he asked. "Online and calibrated, Admiral. Target acquisition systems show green across all platforms." Another technician looked up from her console. "Admiral, we're receiving activation codes from the Himalayan complex. The Aurora Protocol is requesting confirmation." Jin-woo paused at a secured terminal and entered a series of commands that hadn't been used in over 2 centuries. Ancient systems throughout human space began to wake up, their true purposes hidden behind facades of peaceful research and exploration. The galaxy saw weak humans submitting to superior force. They didn't see the careful repositioning of communication satellites that were actually weapons platforms. They missed the research stations that were conducting very different kinds of experiments. They ignored the exploration vessels that were taking extremely precise measurements of their military assets. The tests were working perfectly. Humanity appeared helpless, exactly as their enemies expected. But in the hidden depths of human space, patience was running out. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with unusual speed. Word had spread that Director Kim Hanna had personally requested the meeting, and curiosity filled the Great Hall of Nexus Prime. The galaxy's most powerful beings gathered expecting to witness humanity's final surrender. Admiral Corvin arrived with visible satisfaction. His Krex fleet had successfully blockaded human shipping for 6 weeks without a single act of resistance. "Perhaps the humans have finally learned their place," he told his aide as they entered the chamber. Hivemind Zara floated in surrounded by her telepathic drones. The Vorthak mining operations had proceeded exactly as planned, and several human colonies were now showing signs of atmospheric distress. "Their agricultural yields are declining perfectly," she communicated to her collective. Queen Nexus clicked her mandibles with pleasure as her entourage took their seats. Zephyrian scouts had mapped every human defense installation in the Outer Rim, and the results were laughably inadequate. "Their military capabilities are even weaker than we estimated," she informed her hive commanders. The hall filled with representatives from dozens of species. News networks positioned their cameras for what many expected to be a historic moment, the formal submission of humanity to galactic authority. Betting pools had opened on whether the humans would surrender completely or try to negotiate some face-saving compromise. Then Hannah entered the chamber. Something had changed. She wore the same simple black uniform, carried the same plain datapad, and walked with the same measured pace. But the delegates who had dismissed her as weak 6 weeks ago now found themselves paying closer attention. Her expression remained polite, but the apologetic quality was gone. She approached the speaking platform without the nervous hesitation they remembered. Her movements were precise, controlled, almost military in their efficiency. When she activated the chamber's holographic systems, she did so with the confidence of someone who had used such technology many times before. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast hall. "6 weeks ago, you expressed concerns about humanity's role in galactic affairs. You questioned our commitment to collective security. You suggested that our diplomatic approach indicated weakness." The assembled delegates leaned forward, expecting the usual human responses, apologies, explanations, desperate attempts to appear reasonable while offering concessions. Instead, Hannah continued with unsettling calm. "You decided to test our resolve through various means. The Krex Imperium blockaded our trade routes. The Vorthak Collective threatened our colonies with industrial contamination. The Zephyrian hives probed our defensive installations." Admiral Corvin shifted in his seat. Something in her tone suggested this would not be the surrender speech he had anticipated. "Throughout these tests," Hannah said, "humanity maintained our diplomatic approach. We filed appropriate protests through established channels. We requested peaceful resolution through dialogue. We demonstrated patience in the face of increasingly aggressive actions." Queen Nexus clicked her mandibles impatiently. "Yes, yes. Your weakness is well documented. What tribute do you offer to end these entirely legal activities?" Hannah turned to face the Zephyrian Queen directly. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. These actions were not legal. More importantly, they were not unopposed. The chamber fell silent. Delegates exchanged confused glances. What did she mean by not unopposed? Human resistance had been non-existent. For 200 years, Hannah continued, humanity has chosen diplomacy over warfare. We have preferred negotiation to elimination of threats. We have selected patience over immediate action. You have mistaken these choices for limitations. She activated the chamber's main holographic display. The familiar map of the galaxy appeared, showing star systems, trade routes, and major civilizations in soft blue light. It looked exactly like the displays used in countless previous meetings. You see our civilization as small, scattered, defenseless, Hannah said as she entered commands into her control pad. You observe our merchant vessels and assume they represent our military capacity. You scan our research stations and conclude they pose no threat. Red dots began appearing on the galactic map. At first, only a few dozen scattered points of light. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The assembled delegates watched in growing confusion as the entire galaxy began to sparkle with crimson markers. These represent human installations throughout known space, Hannah explained conversationally. You assumed they were research stations, communication relays, and scientific outposts. You were partially correct. The red dots continued multiplying. They appeared in every system, around every major trade route, near every significant military installation. The scope was staggering. Humanity's presence throughout the galaxy was not small and scattered, but vast and comprehensive. Admiral Corvin stood abruptly. This is impossible. Our long-range sensors would have detected major military installations. Your sensors did detect them, Hannah replied. They correctly identified research facilities. What your analysis failed to recognize was the nature of that research. She highlighted a cluster of dots near Krex space. These stations research advanced gravitational manipulation. They study quantum entanglement across interstellar distances. They develop methods for instantaneous matter conversion. They maintain detailed files on every military asset of every major civilization. Hivemind Zara's bioluminescent patterns flickered with agitation. Research facilities cannot threaten established military forces. Research facilities cannot, Hannah agreed. However, these installations were never limited to research. They communicate targeting solutions across impossible distances. They coordinate responses through quantum encrypted networks. And they maintain galactic peace through the promise of overwhelming force. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Representatives demanded explanations, threatened investigations, and questioned the legality of hidden military installations. But their protests carried an undertone of growing uncertainty. Hannah waited for the noise to subside, then spoke with the same calm politeness she had always displayed. You wanted to test humanity's resolve. Consider yourselves fortunate that we prefer demonstrations to direct action. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Thousands of beings sat in absolute silence as Director Kim Hannah stood calmly at the speaking platform. The holographic display still showed the galaxy dotted with red markers, more human installations than anyone had imagined possible. Admiral Corvin was the first to break the silence. His cybernetic enhancements whirred as he processed what he had seen. You claim these research stations pose a threat to established military forces. Prove it. Hannah nodded as if she had expected the challenge. Very well. The Krex home system contains 17 moons orbiting your capital world. Moon 17 is a barren rock with no strategic value and no population. It serves as a minor mining outpost for rare metals. She manipulated the holographic controls with practiced ease. The display zoomed in on the Krex system, showing the massive industrial world surrounded by its family of moons. Moon 17 appeared as a small gray sphere covered in extraction equipment and automated facilities. This moon will serve as our first demonstration, Hannah announced in the same tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. Several delegates laughed nervously. The idea that humans could threaten Krex territory from across the galaxy seemed absurd. Moon 17 was protected by the same defensive systems that guarded the capital world itself. Your research stations are thousands of light years away, scoffed Admiral Corvin. What could they possibly do to our mining operations? Observe, Hannah said simply. The holographic display showed real-time images of Moon 17. Mining robots crawled across its surface like mechanical insects. Ore processing plants belched steam into the thin atmosphere. Everything appeared completely normal. Then, without warning or visible cause, the moon began to change. It didn't explode or crack apart. Instead, the solid rock simply started to dissolve. The surface became fuzzy, then translucent, then transparent. Within seconds, the entire lunar body had converted to a cloud of dispersing atoms that glowed briefly before fading into space. The mining equipment, the processing plants, the orbital stations, everything vanished along with the moon itself. Where 17 tons of solid matter had existed moments before, only empty space remained. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives jumped to their feet, demanding explanations. Admiral Corvin stared at the display in disbelief, his enhanced vision systems running diagnostics to ensure he wasn't seeing an illusion. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our sensors detected no weapon discharge, no energy buildup, no incoming projectiles. How did you destroy an entire moon?" "We didn't destroy it," Hannah corrected calmly. "We converted its atomic structure to dispersed energy. The process is quite clean and leaves no dangerous radiation. Our research into matter conversion has proven very successful." Hivemind Zara's pale form pulsed with agitated patterns. "This is a trick. Some form of advanced holographic manipulation. The Vorthak collective prizes efficiency above all else," Hannah continued as if there had been no interruption. "Your central processing world coordinates mining operations across 7 galaxies. Its computational capacity exceeds that of most organic civilizations combined." The display shifted to show the Vorthak core world, a planet entirely covered in interconnected computer systems. Massive data centers stretched from pole to pole, their cooling systems creating artificial weather patterns in the atmosphere above. "This facility processes 17 billion calculations per second," Hannah noted. "Quite impressive by galactic standards. However, it relies on quantum processes that are vulnerable to specific forms of interference." She entered another command. The processing world's surface sparkled with billions of tiny lights as its systems operated at peak efficiency. Then, simultaneously across the entire planet, every light went out. The world went dark. Not gradually, not in sections, but all at once. Every circuit, every processor, every backup system failed in perfect synchronization. The planet that had been the computational heart of the Vorthak collective became nothing more than a cold rock in space. "Our research into quantum interference patterns has also shown promising results," Hannah observed. "The shutdown is temporary and causes no permanent damage. Systems will reboot in approximately 6 hours once the interference dissipates." Hivemind Zara collapsed into her chair, her bioluminescent patterns flickering wildly as she tried to process what had happened. Without the central processing world, the collective's coordination was severely limited. Queen Nexus rose with clicking mandibles. "The Zephyrian hives are not dependent on vulnerable technology. Our hive mind operates through quantum entanglement between billions of individual consciousness. No external force can disrupt our mental network." "Quantum entanglement is indeed fascinating," Hannah agreed. "Our researchers have spent considerable time studying how consciousness can be transmitted instantaneously across vast distances. We discovered that the same quantum fields that enable your hive mind can be redirected." The display showed Zephyrian ships throughout the galaxy, massive hive vessels accompanied by countless smaller craft moving in perfect formation. Their coordination was legendary. Each ship moved as part of a single organism, responding to threats and opportunities with supernatural efficiency. Then chaos erupted. Ships that had been flying in precise patterns suddenly veered off course. Fighter squadrons scattered in all directions. Hive vessels collided with their own escorts as pilots received conflicting mental commands. "We temporarily fragmented the quantum entanglement network," Hannah explained as they watched Zephyrian forces throughout the galaxy struggle with confusion. "Individual consciousness is unharmed, but collective coordination is disrupted. The effect will fade in several hours." The chamber sat in stunned silence. 3 demonstrations had just proven that humanity could neutralize the galaxy's greatest military powers without using a single traditional weapon. These demonstrations required no ships, no missiles, no energy weapons, Hannah concluded. "Our research station simply conducted research. From locations you never considered threatening, using methods you never thought dangerous." She turned to face the assembly with the same polite expression she had worn throughout their previous meetings. "Any questions?" The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never experienced such complete silence. Thousands of beings sat motionless, their minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. 3 demonstrations had just rewritten everything they thought they knew about galactic power structures. Admiral Corvin stared at the holographic display where Moon 17 had been. His cybernetic implants ran continuous diagnostics, but the results remained consistent. An entire celestial body had simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field, just empty space where solid matter had been moments before. Hive-mind Zara trembled in her chair, her pale form flickering with confused bioluminescent patterns. Without her central processing world, coordinating even basic thoughts across the collective had become nearly impossible. Individual Vorthak throughout the galaxy were experiencing something they had never known: mental isolation. Queen Nexus clicked her mandibles in rapid, anxious patterns. Her hive vessels were still struggling to maintain formation as fragmented consciousness signals created chaos in their once perfect coordination. Fighter pilots who had never needed to think independently were making desperate attempts to remember basic flight procedures. Other delegates sat in stunned shock. Representatives from civilizations that had built their reputations on military might found themselves facing a terrible new reality. They were not the strongest powers in the galaxy. They never had been. Director Kim Hanna stood calmly at the speaking platform, watching the assembly process what they had learned. Her expression remained the same polite, diplomatic mask she had worn in every previous meeting. But now that mask carried a completely different meaning. "Questions?" she asked again, her voice carrying the same measured tone as always. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, a minor delegate from the Outer Rim territories found his voice. "How long?" he whispered. "How long have you been able to do this?" "Our defensive capabilities have been developing for over 2 centuries, Hannah replied. "We began serious research into advanced physics immediately after first contact with galactic civilization. We wanted to ensure that humanity would never be helpless in the face of superior force." Admiral Corvin's voice came out as a mechanical rasp. "The blockades, the mining threats, the scout probes, you could have stopped all of it instantly. Why didn't you?" Hannah's expression softened slightly. "Because we hoped you would choose to stop on your own. We hoped that reason and diplomacy would prevail. We hoped that we would never need to demonstrate why patience is not the same as powerlessness." She manipulated the holographic controls, and the display returned to showing the galaxy-wide network of human installations. But now the red dots were fading to blue as systems powered down across known space. "Humanity wishes to continue our policy of courtesy and peaceful coexistence," she announced. "We prefer negotiation to intimidation. We choose diplomacy over displays of force. However, we want the galaxy to understand that our politeness was never weakness. It was a choice." The blue dots continued to fade as human installations throughout space returned to dormant status. Weapons systems that could disintegrate moons powered down. Quantum interference generators that could cripple entire civilizations went offline. The galaxy's most advanced military assets returned to masquerading as harmless research stations. "Civilization," Hannah continued, "should be measured not by the capacity for destruction, but by the restraint to choose otherwise. We hope you will help us continue to prove this principle." The chamber remained silent, but the quality of that silence had changed. The shocked disbelief was giving way to something deeper, a fundamental reassessment of galactic reality. A young Krex officer, his voice barely audible, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "What are you?" Hannah smiled, and for the first time in the meeting, her expression seemed genuinely warm rather than diplomatically polite. "We are humans. We prefer courtesy, cooperation, and peaceful resolution of conflicts. We always have." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that ranged from terrified to awed to confused. "But we are also the species that survived ice ages when our entire world froze. We endured plagues that killed half our population. We survived global wars that nearly destroyed our civilization, and we learned to harness nuclear weapons without destroying ourselves in the process. We did all of this before we ever left our home planet." Her voice remained gentle, almost conversational. "We learned very early in our history that sometimes the best way to maintain peace is to be so overwhelmingly prepared for war that no one wants to test your resolve." Admiral Corvin struggled to process this information. "Your entire species, all of you, you're all warriors." "No," Hannah replied. "Most humans are farmers, teachers, artists, scientists, parents. We build things instead of destroying them. We create beauty instead of spreading fear. We explore the universe because we're curious, not because we want to conquer it." She gestured to the fading display of installations across the galaxy. "But when necessary, we can become something else. When threatened, we remember the lessons our ancestors learned in ice and fire and darkness. We remember that survival sometimes requires terrible choices." The holographic display showed the final installations going offline. The galaxy's most advanced weapons network was now indistinguishable from a collection of peaceful research stations. The choice, Hannah said quietly, is yours. We can continue as we have, with humanity as your diplomatic partners, your trading associates, your peaceful neighbors. We can work together to build something better than what existed before. Her smile remained warm, but her words carried unmistakable weight. Or you can choose to test our resolve again. But now you know what that choice means. The galaxy's strongest civilizations sat in their chairs, humbled and outclassed, but offered something unprecedented, an invitation to choose diplomacy over destruction, cooperation over conquest. For the first time in galactic history, true peace seemed possible. Not because the strongest had conquered the weak, but because the strongest had chosen to be gentle.